The desperate call, the galaxy had forgotten about humanity. For 3 centuries, Earth's children had been silent, their last known vessels disappearing beyond the outer rim after the Great Exodus. The Galactic Council had written them off as another failed species, too aggressive and unpredictable to survive among the stars. Commander Vel of the Antaran Defense Fleet stared at the tactical display with growing despair. Red markers filled the hologram, each one representing a Devora battleship closing in on their home system. The insectoid race had swept through 7 sectors already, consuming entire worlds and leaving nothing but barren rock in their wake. "Sir, the 4th defense line has fallen," reported Lieutenant Crix, his blue-scaled hands trembling as he worked the communications console. "The Devourer swarm is 3 hours from Antara Prime. Civilian evacuation is only 60% complete." Vel's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Antarans were a peaceful species. Their technology focused on trade and diplomacy rather than warfare. Their weapons were designed for asteroid mining, not fighting a species that had perfected the art of galactic destruction. "What about the Council reinforcements?" Vel asked, though he already knew the answer. "The nearest battle fleet is 12 hours away, sir. The Zenith Empire is dealing with Devourer attacks on their borders. The Crystalline Collective has gone into full defensive mode. Nobody can spare ships." The bridge fell silent except for the steady beeping of proximity alarms. Through the viewport, Vel could see the orbital shipyards of Antara Prime, their elegant spires gleaming in the light of their twin suns. Soon, those beautiful structures would be nothing but debris. "Sir?" Crix's voice cracked with emotion. "I'm receiving automated distress signals from the outer colonies. The Devourer scouts have reached them. They're gone, sir." Vel closed his eyes. In his mind, he could see the peaceful farming communities of the outer worlds, the crystal gardens that had taken generations to grow, the schools where young Antarans learned about the wonders of the galaxy. All of it would be consumed, processed into raw materials for the Devourer war machine. "Commander," the tactical officer called out, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching the system's edge. Could be more Devourer reinforcements. How many?" Vel's voice was barely a whisper. "I can't tell, sir. The signatures are strange, different from anything in our databases." On the main screen, space itself seemed to ripple. Reality bent and twisted as something vast pushed through the barriers between dimensions. The energy readings spiked beyond anything their sensors had ever recorded. Then they came through. The first ship emerged like a dark prophecy made manifest. It was massive beyond comprehension, easily 3 kilometers long, its hull a matte black that seemed to absorb light itself. Strange markings covered its surface, not the elegant curves of Galactic Council designs, but harsh angles and aggressive lines that spoke of a single purpose: war. "By the ancestors," Crix breathed. "What is that thing?" More ships followed, dozens, then hundreds. They came in formations that the galaxy had not seen for centuries. Battle groups designed for one purpose: the complete and total destruction of their enemies. Their hulls bore scars from countless battles, and their weapons were already powering up. "Sir, I'm receiving a transmission," Crix reported, his voice filled with wonder and fear. "It's on old council frequencies, but the language, it's ancient Terran." Vel's heart stopped beating for a moment. Ancient Terran, the language of humanity, a species that had vanished from galactic records so long ago that most considered them a myth. "Put it through," he ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was calm, controlled, and utterly terrifying in its certainty. The words were translated by their computers, but something was lost in the process: the raw emotion, the cold fury that lay beneath. "This is Admiral Kane of the Human Expeditionary Force. We received your distress signal. All civilian vessels are to maintain current position and await escort to safe zones. All enemy vessels have 30 seconds to leave this system or be destroyed. This is your only warning." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Through the tactical display, they watched as the human fleet moved with impossible precision. Ships that had been lost to time and legend were taking battle positions, their weapons charging with energies that made their own defenses look like toys. "Sir," the tactical officer whispered, "the Devourer fleet is responding. They're moving to attack formation." Vel watched the display with a mixture of hope and terror. Humanity had returned, but what had they become in their long exile among the stars? Ancient fury. Awakened Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the tactical display. 300 years of wandering the dark spaces between galaxies had changed humanity, forged them in fires that the peaceful races of the Galactic Council could never imagine. Devourer fleet is holding position. "Sir," reported Captain Blake, his voice carrying the steady calm of a man who had seen too much war. 1,300 vessels. Standard swarm configuration. Kane nodded slowly. The Devourers were exactly as the old records described, a race that had turned consumption into an art form. They had perfected the ability to strip entire worlds bare, using the raw materials to build ever larger fleets for their expansion. Communications. "Patch me through to all ships," Kane ordered. "Channel open, Admiral." Kane's voice carried across the human fleet, reaching every ship, every crew member who had answered the call to return home. "All vessels, this is Kane. 3 centuries ago, we left this galaxy because we were told we were too violent, too aggressive for civilized space. Today, we return to find our former neighbors begging for the very violence they once condemned." Through the fleet channels, he could hear the quiet acknowledgments from his captains. These were ships that had been modified and rebuilt in the deep dark, their hulls reinforced with materials found in dead galaxies, their weapons upgraded with technology born from desperate necessity. The enemy before us has consumed 7 sectors. They have turned peaceful worlds into graveyards. They believe that might makes right, that the strong can simply take what they want from the weak. Kane's voice hardened. They are about to learn why humanity was once feared across 100 systems. On the sensor displays, the Devourer fleet began to move. Their vessels were organic in appearance, grown rather than built, with hulls that could regenerate damage and weapons that fed on the destruction they caused. They moved like a living swarm, individual ships coordinating with instinctive precision. "First wave incoming," Blake reported. 300 vessels, moving at attack speed. Kane watched the approaching swarm with the patience of a predator. "All ships execute Protocol 7. Let's remind the galaxy what human warfare looks like." The human fleet transformed. Ships that had appeared to be standard battle cruisers suddenly revealed their true nature. Hull plating retracted to expose weapons that no galactic treaty had ever banned, simply because no one had imagined they could exist. Energy cores that had been running cold suddenly blazed to life, pouring power into systems that defied known physics. The Prometheus led the charge. Its main guns, massive rail cannons that could accelerate projectiles to significant fractions of light speed, spoke first. The tungsten rounds crossed the distance between fleets in seconds, striking Devourer vessels with the force of small asteroids. Where the Galactic Council's energy weapons would splash harmlessly against Devourer bioarmor, the human kinetic rounds punched straight through, carrying their devastating energy deep into enemy hulls before exploding in massive fireballs. "Direct hits on 17 targets," reported the weapons officer. All vessels destroyed or disabled, but the Devourers were not helpless prey. Their return fire came in waves of bioplasma, weapons that could eat through conventional armor like acid. The human ships met this attack with a defense the galaxy had forgotten. They moved. Unlike the stately capital ships of other races, human vessels had been designed for speed and maneuverability. They twisted and danced through space like fighters rather than battleships, their pilots drawing on centuries of combat experience to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. "Second wave launching," Blake called out. "They're trying to surround us." Kane smiled grimly. "Signal the retribution and the vengeance. Time to show them our new toys." 2 of the human vessels broke formation, accelerating toward the center of the Devourer swarm. As they flew, their hulls began to change, armor plating sliding aside to reveal weapons that pulsed with barely contained energy. The first Nova cannon fired, and space itself seemed to scream. The weapon tore a hole in reality, creating a localized gravitational distortion that crushed 6 Devourer ships into a ball of compressed matter before exploding in a miniature star. The second ship unleashed something worse, a quantum disruptor that caused matter itself to forget how to exist. 50 enemy vessels simply ceased, leaving behind only empty space where they had been. The Devourer swarm faltered, their instinctive coordination disrupted by losses they had never experienced before. For the first time in their expansion, they faced an enemy that was more destructive than they were. The price of peace, the battle raged for 6 hours. What had begun as a desperate last stand became something else entirely, a demonstration of what humanity had learned in their long exile from galactic civilization. The Devourer swarm, which had swept through 7 sectors unopposed, found itself facing weapons and tactics they had never encountered. Captain Reed commanded the destroyer Shadow, dancing through the debris field that had once been the enemy's left flank. His ship was smaller than the great battleships, but it carried experimental technology that made it worth a dozen conventional vessels. The phase cloak allowed it to slip between dimensions, appearing behind enemy lines to deliver devastating surprise attacks. "Target the bio-command nodes," Reed ordered his weapons officer. "Every swarm has a hierarchy. Cut off the head, and the body dies." The Shadow materialized inside the Devourer formation, its particle beams slicing through the organic neural networks that coordinated the enemy fleet. Without their command structure, individual Devourer ships began operating on pure instinct, becoming easier prey for the human hunters. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Kane watched the tactical display with growing satisfaction. The enemy numbers were dropping steadily, but he knew this was just the beginning. The Devourers were not the real threat. They were a symptom of something far worse. "Admiral," Blake reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Antaran command ship." Kane nodded. "Put them through." Commander Vell's image appeared on the main screen, his alien features showing a mixture of gratitude and shock. "Admiral Kane, we cannot thank you enough. Our scans show that you have destroyed over half the enemy fleet. How is this possible?" Kane studied the Antaran commander for a long moment. "Tell me, Commander, how long has it been since your people fought a real war?" Vell's mandibles clicked in confusion. "We have not engaged in warfare for over 2 centuries. The Galactic Council maintains peace through diplomacy and trade agreements. And how well did those agreements protect you from the Devourers?" The Antaran fell silent, and Kane could see the realization dawning in his alien eyes. The galaxy had grown soft, dependent on treaties and negotiations to solve problems that required harder solutions. "The Devourers are not the real enemy," Kane continued. "They are a force of nature like a plague or a storm. The real enemy is the weakness that allowed them to spread unchecked across 7 sectors, while the great powers of the galaxy did nothing." On the tactical display, the last of the Devourer battle groups was breaking apart. Human ships pursued the fleeing survivors with ruthless efficiency, ensuring that none would escape to rebuild their forces. It was a level of thoroughness that made the watching Antarans uncomfortable. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "I'm receiving multiple transmissions from across the galaxy. Word of the battle is spreading. The Zenith Empire, the Crystalline Collective, the Trade Federation. They all want to speak with us." Kane's expression hardened. "I'm sure they do. Now that the shooting is over and the danger has passed, suddenly everyone wants to be humanity's friend again." He turned back to Commander Vell. "Your people are safe, Commander. The immediate threat has been eliminated. But you need to understand something. This will happen again. The Devourers, or something like them, will return. And next time, humanity might not be there to save you." Through the ship's communication system, reports were coming in from across the human fleet. The battle was over, but the cost had been significant. 12 ships lost, hundreds of crew members who would never see home again. For the Antarans, it was a miraculous rescue. For humanity, it was just another day in their long war for survival. "What do you want from us?" Vell asked quietly. Kane considered the question. What did humanity want? They had left the galaxy 3 centuries ago, driven out by species who feared their potential for violence. They had found new worlds in the dark spaces between galaxies, built a civilization that could survive anything the universe threw at them. They had become something the galaxy had never seen, a species that embraced its capacity for war while still maintaining its humanity. "We want nothing from you, Commander," Kane said finally. "We came because we heard a call for help. And despite everything, we still remember what it means to protect those who cannot protect themselves." He paused, looking out at the debris field where the Devourer fleet had met its end. "But understand this, the galaxy is changing. The old ways, the peaceful isolation that allowed civilizations to flourish in safety, those days are ending. What comes next will require strength and the willingness to use it." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in thoughtful silence. Echoes of the past in the days following the battle. Representatives from across the Galactic Council began arriving at Antara Prime. The news had spread like wildfire. Humanity had returned, and they had brought with them weapons that defied understanding. The species that had once been exiled for their aggressive nature had become the galaxy's unlikely saviors. Ambassador Tylon of the Zenith Empire was the first to request a formal meeting. He arrived aboard a diplomatic vessel that was more artwork than spacecraft, its crystalline hull catching and refracting light in patterns that had taken generations to perfect. The Zenith had always prided themselves on their cultural achievements, their advancement beyond the crude necessities of warfare. Admiral Kane met him in the diplomatic bay of the Prometheus, a stark metal chamber that contrasted sharply with the elegant curves of Zenith architecture. The ambassador's tall, graceful form seemed almost fragile in the utilitarian surroundings. "Admiral Kane," Tylon began, his voice carrying the practiced tone of centuries of diplomatic training, "on behalf of the Zenith Empire, I wish to express our gratitude for your intervention." The threat posed by the Devourers was considerable. Kane studied the ambassador with eyes that had seen too much. "The threat was exactly what our intelligence reports said it would be 300 years ago, Ambassador. The same reports that your empire dismissed as human paranoia and warmongering." Tylon's elegant features flickered with discomfort. The political climate of that era was complex. There were many voices advocating for different approaches to galactic security. There were voices warning about species like the Devourers. Kane corrected. Voices that were ignored because they came from humans, and humans were considered too violent for civilized discourse. The uncomfortable silence stretched between them until Tylon finally spoke again. "What is your intent, Admiral? Why did you return?" Kane turned to look out the observation window at the human fleet. The ships hung in space like dark angels, their scarred hulls telling stories of battles fought in the deep dark between galaxies. Each vessel represented decades of struggle, innovation born from necessity, and the hard-won wisdom that came from facing extinction and surviving. "We didn't return for the galaxy, Ambassador. We came because someone called for help. And despite everything, we remember what it means to answer that call." On the bridge of the cruiser Defiance, Captain Morgan reviewed the latest intelligence reports. Her ship had been assigned to scout the systems the Devourers had attacked, gathering information about their methods and capabilities. What they had found was worse than anyone had imagined. 7 systems, completely stripped, she reported to Admiral Kane over the secure channel. Not just the planets, they took everything. Asteroid belts, comets, even the gas from the outer giants. It's like they erased entire solar systems. Kane's image on the communication screen showed no surprise. Estimated population loss? 43 billion sentient beings, sir. Gone without a trace. The number hung in the air like a condemnation. While the great powers of the galaxy had debated and delayed, billions had died. The peaceful civilizations that had exiled humanity for their violent nature had stood by and watched as genocide unfolded on an unprecedented scale. "Sir," Morgan continued, "there's something else. We found evidence that the Devourers have been operating in this galaxy for over 50 years. The Council knew they were coming. Kane's expression hardened. "Send me the full report, Captain. It seems our former neighbors have some explaining to do." Meanwhile, in the Council chambers of Antara Prime, Commander Vell was meeting with his own government's leadership. The ancient building had been constructed as a monument to peace, its flowing architecture designed to inspire harmony and cooperation. Today, it felt like a mausoleum for naive ideals. "The humans saved us," Vell reported to the assembled ministers. "Their ships, their weapons, their tactics, everything was beyond our comprehension. They fought like nothing we've ever seen. Minister Carrick's, eldest of the council members, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. And what do they want in return? That's what troubles me, Vel admitted. They want nothing. No territorial concessions, no trade agreements, no political alliances. They came when called, fought when needed, and now they're preparing to leave. The council chamber fell silent. In their experience, no species acted without self-interest. The concept of intervention without reward was alien to their understanding of galactic politics. Perhaps, Minister Carrick said slowly, that is why they were so feared. A species that fights not for conquest or gain, but simply because they believe it is right. Such beings cannot be controlled, cannot be predicted, cannot be stopped. Through the chamber's great windows, they could see the human fleet in orbit, dark shapes against the stars. Each ship represented a lesson the galaxy had tried to forget, that sometimes peace could only be preserved through the willingness to wage war. The New Dawn 3, weeks after the Battle of Antara Prime, Admiral Kane stood in the observation deck of the Prometheus, watching the stars beyond the viewport. The human fleet was preparing for departure, their mission complete but their purpose unchanged. They had answered the call for help, demonstrated their capabilities, and now it was time to return to the deep dark where they belonged. Captain Blake approached with a data pad containing the final mission reports. Sir, all ships are reporting ready for jump. The new gravity drives are functioning within normal parameters. Kane accepted the report but didn't look at it. His attention was focused on the small fleet of alien vessels that had gathered to witness their departure. Representatives from dozens of species had come, drawn by curiosity, fear, and a growing understanding that the galaxy had changed forever. What's the word from Earth, Captain? Blake's expression grew somber. Still no response, sir. The automated beacons we left behind are functioning, but the planet remains in isolation. Whatever happened there after our exodus? We may never know, Kane nodded. Earth was a wound that might never heal. The homeworld that had chosen isolation over the stars. The humans who had answered the call to Antara Prime were the descendants of those who had left everything behind, who had chosen the unknown over the familiar. A communication alert interrupted his thoughts. Sir, incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. Priority 1 diplomatic channel. Put it through. The holographic image of Chancellor Vex materialized in the center of the observation deck. The ancient being's crystalline features reflected light in patterns that spoke of great age and accumulated wisdom. As the nominal leader of the Galactic Council, Vex had presided over 3 centuries of relative peace. Admiral Kane, the Chancellor began, the Council has reviewed the events at Antara Prime. Your intervention, while effective, has raised certain questions about humanity's current capabilities and intentions. Kane's smile was cold. I'm sure it has, Chancellor. The question is, are you asking out of curiosity or because you're afraid? The Council seeks understanding, Admiral. Your species departed under difficult circumstances. Your return under these conditions, with these weapons. Vex paused, the light patterns in his crystalline form shifting to indicate deep contemplation. We wish to discuss the possibility of renewed diplomatic relations. Diplomatic relations, Kane repeated. Like the ones that led to our exile 300 years ago? The ones that condemned us as too violent for civilized space? Through the viewport, Kane could see the sleek diplomatic vessels of the council member species, their elegant forms a stark contrast to the brutal functionality of human warships. Each represented a civilization that had chosen peace over preparedness, cooperation over strength. The galaxy has changed, Admiral, Vex continued. The threat posed by species like the Devourers was not fully understood in earlier times. Perhaps there is wisdom in maintaining forces capable of dealing with such threats. Kane turned away from the hologram to address his bridge crew. All ships prepare for jump. Set course for the Andromeda relay. Admiral, Vex's voice carried a note of urgency. Surely we can discuss this. The Council is prepared to offer full diplomatic recognition, territorial concessions, trade agreements. Chancellor, Kane interrupted, turning back to face the hologram. 3 centuries ago, you banished us from this galaxy because we were willing to fight. Today you want us back because we're still willing to fight. Do you see the contradiction in your position? The crystalline being's light patterns shifted to indicate confusion and frustration. What do you want, Admiral? What would it take for humanity to return to the galactic community? Kane considered the question for a long moment. Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for another jump into the unknown. These were people who had been forged in the dark spaces between galaxies, who had learned to survive on their own terms. We want nothing from you, Chancellor. We have found our own way among the stars. We have built our own civilization, one that doesn't require the approval of others to exist. The communication channel began to break up as the gravity drives reached full power. Through the static, Kane could hear Vex trying to continue the conversation, but the words were lost in the growing energy field. As the jump sequence initiated, Kane watched the gathered alien vessels through the viewport. Some would learn from what they had witnessed. Others would return to their comfortable illusions about the nature of peace and security. But all would remember that humanity had returned when called, fought when needed, and departed when the task was complete. The stars shifted and twisted as the Prometheus and her escort entered hyperspace, carrying them back to the deep dark where legends were born and heroes were forged in the fires of necessity. Behind them, the galaxy was left to contemplate a new truth. Sometimes, the greatest act of civilization is the willingness to be uncivilized in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. The end.